Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:06, and good news, everybody. We have a new episode of Michelle Obama's podcast. And yes, she picked up right where she left off. We'll tell that to you coming up. Also at 7:35, Representative Andy Harris, 8:05, Katie McFarland, 8:35, Sean Spicer. It's Larry O'Connor alongside fellow Marylander Bethany Mandel. Good morning, Bethany. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Are we going to hear more about how Michelle hates her husband?
Your podcast is so much better than Michelle Obama's podcast. Will you please tell us about it?
Thank you. It's called The Mom Wars. It's also a Substack, and we have a new episode out, I think like 2 days ago, about lots of things. One of them was that I ran into Usha Vance at the Air and Space Museum a week and a half ago.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Just
really
ran
fun.
into the second lady of the United States.
I want to tell you that story because it was actually amazing, but not right now.
Not right now, because we have a guest waiting, and he's running for office Commonwealth-wide in Virginia. He's the Republican nominee for lieutenant governor. He's John Reid. Good morning, Mr. Reid. Good to talk with you.
Hey, good morning. I'm glad to talk to you. I'm in Richmond today, but I was up your way yesterday, and gosh, I'm trying to think of where I'm going to be by the end of the night. But it was
that's the thing.
Driving all over.
Hey, is it different to campaign in Northern Virginia up here in sort of the swamp suburbs versus in, I guess, more conservative-friendly parts of the state? It really is quite a geographic and ideological landscape to maneuver when you're running statewide in Virginia.
Yes, I will say that I have I think there are Marines who are at Paris Island who are treated nicer than I have been sometimes in Alexandria.
Really? Tell us what happened. What did they do?
When I was doing the petitions just to get on the ballot, boy, there's some built-in hostility from some folks as soon as you say you're Republican. The one thing I got going for me as a former talk show host is I'm pretty good at talking people off the ledge. Mm-hmm. So I've had pretty good results when people start out with a little bit of hostility, asking, well, why? Why do you feel that way?
Well,
and then you give them 2 or 3 minutes to complain, and you can actually have a conversation.
So, John, apparently you're talking the talk and walking the walk, because I saw that you were out on July 4th shaking hands in Fairfax, and as you were, going through the crowd, you met up with a woman named Abigail Spanberger. Did you get some hostility from her? Did you convince her to vote for you?
Yeah, I don't know that I've gotten her to cast a vote for me. But, one of the things that I grew up in Virginia, and people have always had political conflicts. There's always been the Republican and the Democrat chasm between policy positions. But there hasn't been the open hostility that has existed in the last few years. And I would really like to be kind of the reasonable person, if it's at all possible, to restore some decency at the Capitol in Richmond. I don't know about, when I worked in the Senate in D.C., it seemed like things were pretty far gone, but it doesn't have to be that way in Richmond. Abigail Spanberger was super nice. We're not going to agree on everything, but she was super nice. And I had stopped. I didn't even see that she was there. I had just stopped to say, hey, Democrats, it's July 4th. Let's have a day of unity. And the sea parted of the volunteers, and there Abigail was, and we had a very nice 2 or 3 minute conversation at most, all pleasantries, but that's where this starts, is just basic decency with people who disagree, and I appreciated it.
So I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate on you for a second.
Okay.
So yesterday we had a Supreme Court decision that allowed Trump to move forward with axing lots of federal jobs. It's interesting because this area has such a high concentration, obviously, for obvious reasons. It's interesting running as a Republican in these times. So what are you telling people when they come up to you and say, it's because of Trump that I don't have a job anymore? Like, that's a pretty hard conversation to have, and how are you navigating that?
Oh, it is very hard. And the first thing I start with is empathy about that situation. I lost my job when I was living in D.C. twice and had to cash out my 401k. I'm still recovering from that, so I make it very clear. I'm not laughing at you. I am not one of the people with the chainsaws, going, let's cut this thing down, because that affects real people in Northern Virginia, and there are a lot of people down in Tidewater who feel the same way. Like, what's going to happen? There's a palpable frustration, anxiety, and hurt. And, we make fun sometimes of federal workers, or I don't, but a lot of people make fun of federal workers. There are a lot of people who really take their job seriously and work very hard, and the idea that they're going to lose their job is upsetting. So the other thing that I talk about after I share that I've been through this experience is in Virginia, we have a robust economic ecosystem, and it's because we're a right-to-work state. It's not just because of the proximity to the capital. Businesses want to come here because we're a great place to locate. And if we lose the right to work and force everybody into a union, which is what the Democrats are pledging to do, that economic ecosystem where you can find another job within a couple of months of losing your main job, that ain't going to exist any longer. And it gives me an opportunity to talk about why Republicans have set up backstops that can help people when they find themselves in this situation. And there are a lot of people in the private sector who have been through this multiple times, and you can survive, but you got to have a good economic policy.
Well, and the good news, John Reid, is that, most Virginians have been through this, those who haven't worked for the government. I mean, listen, I have sympathy for anyone who loses their job, but we're burying our head in the sand if we think that this is unique suddenly to people who work in Northern Virginia for the federal government, because the rest of us who work for private industry, we've been through this. This is pretty normal, actually. Very rarely do you get a job and stay in it for 40 years these days. That's unique to the federal government. And I think that's part of the problem. I understand. I have empathy for people on a human level, certainly. But let's get real. When Abigail Spanberger says, or for that matter, Ghazala Hashmi says that this is outrageous and unacceptable, it's like, where have they been? Have they not seen what happens to normal Virginians in the private sector?
Yeah, we're $37 trillion in debt. So you got to recognize that some changes are coming to the federal government if we want to continue to exist for another couple of decades.
Yeah.
And they don't usually have a lot to say, like, down in Emporia, where part of my family is from, at Southside. They just lost 450 jobs in woodworking. I mean, they're not going to be easily replaced, and they don't have the same economic ecosystem as Northern Virginia. So
imagine wanting to be governor or lieutenant governor of Virginia and say, I'm going to build a great economy as long as the federal government pays for all the jobs. It's like, how about you actually do something for the economy? We're speaking with John Reid. He's running for lieutenant governor. Let's talk about your opponent, because I know you want to debate her. I would love to see those debates. But have you heard anything back from her? It sounds like she's more interested in debating Donald Trump than you, John Reid.
I wake up every morning and I check my email and I check her Twitter feed to see whether Ghazala Hashmi has agreed to debate me, and it's crickets, nothing. I came up with this idea of 10 debates, which allows us to do a couple of them in each region. So you're not just talking top-line stuff, you're talking local stuff that people, that are unique to Roanoke or unique to Virginia Beach or unique to Emporia and their employment situation. And I thought that made good sense. If you want to be a statewide leader, and she's been in the Senate for several years, and she's proposed some really crazy nutcase proposals, then let's talk about it. I'm not scared to do that, and just nothing. And I keep waiting for a counter proposal, nothing. So that's weird to me. I don't think voters like that. I don't think voters will accept that in 2025.
John Reid for Virginia. It's spelled R-E-I-D. JohnReidForVirginia.com is the website. John, keep us updated on the campaign, and especially if you ever hear anything from your opponent there, Ms. Hashmi, about some debates. I think the people of Virginia deserve to actually hear what their candidates stand for before they vote. It's an old-fashioned idea.
You got it.
All right, thanks for that.
It's going to be epic. Larry, Bethany, thank you.
7:15.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Michelle Obama has another episode of her embarrassingly futile attempt to define herself outside of her husband's shadow. The backhanded slams and criticisms of her president, the outright hostility that she shows with her sexually ambiguous brother, Michelle Obama, once again, bringing the good stuff to her podcast. Unlike Bethany Mandel's Mom Wars podcast, by the way.
Unlike that. Thank you, Larry. One mention. Could we plug it? And you are on it, like white on rice.
Here's Michelle Obama with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And by the way, when you hear this, I just want you to know This is Michelle Obama, nearing 60 years old, worth upwards to $100 million, speaking with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who was born into privilege, then turned that privilege into an acting career that made her worth close to $250,000. And here they are whining about being a woman in America.
We talk about this a lot, how women, as we age, we get pushed out of the picture.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Right when we're, as you know, now that I'm 60,
yeah,
this is really the first time in my life where I feel completely me, and I can absolutely embrace my wisdom.
Yes.
I mean, because I think we as women, we spend most of our lives saying, well, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. We qualify everything.
And we apologize.
We apologize. We don't want to put our opinions on the table.
Can we
because
pause
maybe
there?
we're
I'm
wrong.
sorry. Has this woman ever met Michelle Obama? Did Michelle Obama go through her time in a public life as the First Lady of the United States apologizing for her opinion or pretending like she didn't know what she was talking about? For God's sake, she was the most arrogant, pompous woman that I'd ever seen.
As a woman who believes in the strength of women and the power of women, and I love being a woman, I don't understand why they insist so strongly on belittling women at every single turn. We are weak. We are afraid. I don't know who you're talking about, Michelle, but I am neither of those things. I am strong. Like, that's what they used to say when we would talk about this is what it is to be a woman. And now it's like we've all rewound to 1950, and being a woman is just about wearing lipstick and a dress, and it doesn't matter what your genitalia or your biology is. And we're meek. We're powerless. Who can help us?
By every objective measure, women, whether it's college degrees, college admissions, doctorates, roles in the professional world, I mean, they wanted equality, they wanted empowerment, they wanted opportunities, and they have them right now, women do. It appears, by the way, women, the more they get of those things, the more unhappy they are. We'll talk about that a little later in the program. A new study out shows, guess what? The happiest women in America are the ones who are married and raising children.
Yep. And it's funny because I was thinking to myself, ooh, I should write about this. Let me open up the news story. I'll write it for the Washington Examiner. And you know who beat me to it? Our amazing producer, Heather Hunter, beat me to it. So go to the Washington Examiner website. You can read it there. She beat me to it.
The answer to your question about why these two objectively high-profile, independent, wealthy, successful women in their own right are now complaining about how awful it is to be a woman in America, despite all of those things, it boils down to one thing: their attitude towards men. Here, listen to the rest of the thought.
Table because maybe we're wrong. We're always hedging. Because in the back of our minds, we weren't raised with the certainty of maleness that, kind of the confidence that young men in their 30s have, which they haven't earned. They just have it. We don't start feeling that and owning that until our 50s and 60s at a time when we start to be treated as invisible in society. And the notion that you are capturing that wisdom in a systematic way is powerful.
Yeah, I think it's critical.
There you go. We don't need to hear what Julia Louis-Dreyfus has to say. It's really about Michelle Obama. Do you have thoughts about that, about the maleness?
As the mother of daughters, and Michelle Obama is also the mother of daughters, is this the message that these young girls are getting, that they are not going to become real women until their 50s or 60s? I mean, I think about the books that are written for girls nowadays. Like, all of it feels very retrograde. And it's really disappointing and strange to hear it from a first lady who is confident, like, that's the Michelle Obama I want to hear from. But I think at the end of the day, she is just expressing her anger, maybe particularly at one man.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Projecting onto all of y'all.
I can finally be me and be confident in who I am. Wow, what does that say about how her husband has treated her all of these years?
Yeah, it's not great.
But this whole thing about men being raised with a certain maleness that they didn't have to earn, that it just came automatically. I'd love to follow up with her and say, are you telling me that men and women are maybe born differently?
No, Larry. That's
whoa,
ridiculous.
no. I think this is worth exploring. Please pull on this thread a little bit. So there is actually a distinction between being male and being female. Please tell us what that is. In fact, while you're at it, just make it simple. What is a woman?
Yeah. So I think this is also an unadvertised benefit of being the mother of sons, because I have learned so much about the male experience by watching little boys grow up.
Yes.
And they don't have this self-assured confidence that she seems to think they have. It makes me wonder if she's talked to a man before. She's lived with one, perhaps, for the last 15 years. I know I keep coming back to this but I have questions, Larry.
Real fast, a little bit more about Michelle Obama and how she's finally blossomed from this caterpillar in the cocoon state, into this beautiful soaring butterfly. Here, listen.
Yeah. This stage in life for me personally, is the first time that I've been completely free.
Yeah, there's a real release.
Where every choice that I make in my life is not about my husband, not about his career, not about what my kids need or where they're going. It's totally about me.
So angry, so bitter.
So angry. Oh. They are never pictured together anymore.
Oh, man. And the podcast is failing, but we love it. And we want it to, I'm ready to invest in a second season just so we can hear more.
Same with Meghan Markle.
From Michelle Obama. Yes, exactly. It's 7:24. Coming up, what's with Westmore's failed obsession with windmills? I mean, just move to Amsterdam. Get it over with. We'll talk to Andy Harris next.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Good Thursday morning at 7:36 here. You're listening to O'Connor and Company on WMAL. Coming up at 8:05, KT McFarland. At 8:35 brings us Sean Spicer. The name's familiar. I'll have to look it up during a break. It's Larry O'Connor with Bethany Mandel. Good morning, Bethany.
Good morning, Larry. So excited to be here today.
Joining us right now is Congressman Andy Harris of Maryland to discuss the ongoing brewing controversy over Westmore's insistence on wind energy. Congressman Harris, thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Yeah, so reporter Gary Collins out of Baltimore has been pursuing this story. Westmore got a bunch of national publicity and kudos from the Democrat Party and liberal activists for announcing his big Green Deal initiative for Maryland. And by 2025, we were supposed to have 550 new jobs of Marylanders making windmills for wind farms. Are any of those jobs actually around? Has this happened? Has he hit his mark? Because it doesn't look like anything's happening where it was supposed to happen.
Well, nothing's happened yet, and I don't think anything's going to happen. I think America has woken up to the fact that offshore wind is the most expensive way to generate electricity, and with electricity bills going up, why in the world would we look to generate expensive electricity when we can generate cheap electricity with coal and with natural gas?
Aren't they also, ironically, an environmental hazard, not just for the sea life and the birds, but also it's an eyesore for pretty valuable real estate there on the ocean?
Well, yeah, it obviously takes energy to build a windmill. We don't know what's going to happen when they go out of, when they stop working. Obviously, some of them broke apart off of Block Island, and they didn't even have a hurricane up there to do it. This is just a foolish idea. The windmills have never been built somewhere where hurricanes can come through. They're built on the North Sea, but on the North Sea, there are high winds, but there are no hurricanes. And so it's just a crazy idea. But again, it's the climate alarmists who somehow think that if you build offshore windmills, all of a sudden, climate change is going to end. It's foolishness. It's expensive. But I'm not surprised the governor's doing it because the governor wants to run for president. And again, the radical parts of the Democrat Party want these crazy expensive offshore windmills being built.
Yeah.
So as a Maryland resident who gets constant letters and emails from PEPCO chiding me for daring to use energy, and also someone, with 6 kids on a budget. What is this going to do, this push that's coming from Wes Moore away from, the energy sources that have kept Maryland running for the last however many decades? What is this going to do to my bottom line? How much are my energy bills going to go up if they keep on pushing this nonsense?
Well, your energy bills are going to go up, and your tax bills are going to go up because these are taxpayer funded. The cost is sometimes hidden. It's hidden in your taxes because there are subsidies from the state and the federal government. The federal government subsidies are huge. The president's executive order this week, I think, is going to start to eliminate some of them. The other cost is that because it's what's called an intermittent source of energy, unlike coal, natural gas, nuclear, hydropower, these are intermittent sources, and that means you have to build a bigger grid because you have to duplicate parts of the grid for these intermittent sources, so that their costs that's the part that will show up on your electric bill. The fact that your distribution charges are going to be so high because you have to build new grid.
Right. So I've heard Wes Moore's announcement that he's going to transition the state to 100% green energy by 2035. How does he have a plan, or is that just sort of he's just declaring it and hoping that someone in 2034 comes up with one?
Well, the funny thing is he's not talking about the fact that right now Maryland imports 40% of its electricity, almost all of it from Pennsylvania and surrounding states that actually burn natural gas and coal to produce that electricity. So when he says that, I'm assuming that he means that all the electricity generated in the state, but there's pitiful little electricity generated in the state right now because the climate alarmists have closed down the clean-burning coal plants, these ones that, again, ratepayers have spent hundreds of millions of dollars to put scrubbers on these plants, and then the climate alarmists just close them down anyway. The bottom line is that this is a pipe dream. Maryland does not exist isolated from other states, and will continue to depend upon other states like Pennsylvania and West Virginia that will burn fossil fuels cleanly. They'll burn them cleanly, but they will generate electricity with fossil fuels.
Sorry, I have one more question. Yeah. So I read in an interview in the Daily Signal that it's not just, it's going to add to all of our normal bills that you would think, like Pepco, but also that it could impact commercial fisheries. Is this going to make my fish more expensive? Like, what are the other unforeseen ramifications of this?
Oh, there are many of them. Yes, if you like to buy the shrimp, some of the other fish that's harvested off of Ocean City, it's going to become more expensive or less available. It'll make us more dependent upon foreign sources. Again, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The other thing that nobody talks about is up in the Delaware coast, the horseshoe crabs are going to be affected, and horseshoe crabs. There's an industry of catching them, taking the blood from them, and using a product from that blood to test all the intravenous drugs to make sure that they don't have what's called endotoxin. So there are so many ramifications of what's going on. This was rushed through by the Biden administration for political correctness, and thank goodness the Trump administration is hitting the pause button, and we're going to get to the bottom of whether or not these should ever be built, and I don't think they ever will be.
So in the big picture here, Governor Wes Moore is spending all of his time putting out cutesy social media videos attacking Donald Trump and trying to raise money for his future presidential campaign. Maryland has hit the 5th most expensive cost of living in America. It's among the top 3 most expensive states to retire. Crime is actually on the rise, as an MS-13 gang member was just apprehended in Indiana because a state's attorney let him out on parole or on bail here in Maryland, and he fled the state. They're not taking the gang warfare seriously from criminal illegal immigrants. This seems like a great opportunity for a Republican to rise up and make a case against Wes Moore. Andy Harris, do you have any idea who that Republican might be?
I don't. I hope Larry Hogan would run, but I don't think he's going to run this time. Look, this is a tough state. This state is dominated by Democrats. It'll be tough to beat Wes Moore because Again, he talks a good game, but in the end, Maryland is going to pay more in taxes. They're going to pay more in electric bills. This year's legislative session coming up, there's no way they can balance the budget without raising taxes. So Westmore is going to have to raise taxes, and then he's going to have to face the citizenry to tell people why, when he was elected, he said he wouldn't raise taxes. But, of course, like all Democrats, they raise taxes.
Yeah. Yeah, but ultimately, the people of Maryland, they need to have a choice. They need to be able to have an alternative. And it sounds like you don't see anybody stepping up to the plate to be that alternative.
Well, modern elections are expensive. You have to raise. In this case, Westmore is going to raise tens of millions of dollars because, again, like you say, he wants to raise a national profile. But when he raises taxes in the state, when electric bills continue to go up in the state, I think the burnish will be gone. And I think that, again, I don't think he's going to be a serious candidate for president when the Maryland legislature and the liberals in the Maryland legislature get through with him.
Yeah. Meanwhile, that's great. We'll stop his presidential ambitions. And meanwhile, Maryland still has to suffer with the ramifications of his governorship. Thanks for joining us. Good to talk to you, Andy Harris.
Thank you.
WMAL's Vince Colonnese, weekdays at noon on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
We're coming up on the one-year anniversary of the July 13th assassination attempt on then-candidate, former President Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. We had Selena Zito on yesterday, who has written the definitive book of the events of that day and of that campaign. And, well, just hours after our interview with Selena Zito, we got huge news about that assassination attempt. The Secret Service suspended 6 people without pay or benefits 1 year later for their apparent negligence in connection to this assassination attempt. It took a year.
How powerful is Selena Zito that she can get results like this in just a few hours after her book Butler, which is now currently number 23 on Amazon. Everyone should go buy it. How powerful is she that she got this to happen?
Well, it's what a journalist wants to do, is to draw attention to an issue and see if changes can be made. Here's the concern, though. Secret Service Deputy Director Matt Quinn told CBS News that the penalties for these 6 agents ranged from 10 days to 42 days of leave without pay or benefits. Now, I'm not the smartest guy out there. I never pretended to be. I don't have any sort of highfalutin degree, but I'm just thinking, if your job is to work for the Secret Service, and the Secret Service basically has one primary responsibility, and that is to protect the safety of the President of the United States. And clearly there was a failure here, and they've isolated 6 people that contributed to that failure. Larry, and you still keep your job?
I think that you're not being fair. If you recall, that roof in Butler was slanted.
That's right.
How could they possibly
I forgot about
protect the president on a slanted roof from a sniper that everyone saw and was screaming at the Secret Service, "There's a man with a gun, there's a man with a gun." I didn't see a million of those videos in the days after that assassination attempt. So, I don't see how you could possibly accuse anyone of negligence.
The sarcasm cuts deep on this one, and you're 100% right. Meanwhile, Mr. Quinn said, we're laser focused on fixing the root causes of the problem. Are you?
That's why it took a year. Yeah. It really had to be careful before they handed out the really, really horrible punishment of 10 to 42 days of vacation.
You work at McDonald's.
Sorry, pay without leave. Sorry.
Let's say you work at McDonald's and your job is the French fries, and you don't make the French fries, or maybe you burn the French fries, or maybe you undercook the French fries, or maybe you drop the French fries on the floor. Are you going to keep your job?
It's the only reason that people go to McDonald's for the fries. Let's be real here.
Yeah, and the only way you pay for a Secret Service is to keep the president from having to get assassinated.
10 to 42 days of vacation. Granted, it's without pay and without benefits. 42 days?
Mr. Quinn, when asked why nobody was fired, he replied, "We aren't going to fire our way out of this."
I think that you can, actually.
That's a good start.
I think what you do is, again, not a Secret Service person here, just a regular woman in Maryland. What you do is you fire the baddies and you hire the goodies.
There it is.
And then you got good ones.
It bothers me when quality control on a radio host's work product is actually higher and more scrutinized than the Secret Service. Again, millimeters away from that bullet entering President Trump's skull. In, 42 days is going to be the 1 per 10 days. Yep. Vacation. It's 7:53.